half the league onward. Today we'll finish up in memoriam. I'm glad so many of you came all the way through, because I know that discussing the first two parts we divided a little bit. It's an emotional strain, and it was very hard to find an upbeat moment to conclude on when you're dealing with something which has a long and a slow and emotional shape, as the memoriam has. And yet it's certainly a poem worth the effort. I'm just saying, I'm not sure it's a poem I can read, but it's a poem I can teach. And the teaching of the memoriam is a real pleasure. But something else came up as a result of last week that I think I need to talk about, because two of you mentioned something which I think may be reiterating, though I'm pretty sure that I've talked about it before. And what I'm referring to is how I teach, what my teaching style is, and what my intention is as a teacher and as a speaker. Because I had two different ladies come up last week and mentioned to me that the general unspoken or maybe spoken policy of the club is no politics, no religion. And I thought, when I get two people commenting, it's still I understand it myself, and this is not a place for politicization, obviously, or expression of, I think, religious stance. I believe this myself. Now, you know where I come from. Most of you have watched me, and you know that I think one cannot avoid the latter of those two issues. I don't know how you can if you're teaching literature, though it's possible by teaching literature as an intellectual exercise only. And yet, I came to believe, after quite a few years, I tried to put in my own mind what it meant to be a teacher and how one teaches well. And I think maybe because you know me so well, I should actually talk a little bit about what my approach is. First, politics is essentially irrelevant to me, except insofar as we can use it to make an emotional point. Okay? And so I very seldom say anything in politics that reveals my personal political beliefs, either to my students, which is unacceptable in high school either, because you have a lot of power over them, or I think even to you, who I don't have any power over. And most of you know what you believe. But I will make a point if I think it's pertinent. Like last week, when I said the point about the 19th century that Tennyson is expressing for us is that we are now in an age of uncertainty. That's the problem. Everything we could rely on, the church, the science we thought we had, is gone. And what Tennyson does in In Memoriam is express an uncertainty which is magnified 1,000 times over to us, which is why you have to know the 19th century. They're the people who first articulated our own difficulties in the late 20th century. And I used the example last week of how if Tennyson is uncertain as a result of Darwin, how much more uncertain we must be as a result of living in a post-nuclear age, the post-World War II, the age of the bomb. And I said, President Reagan can push a button. And I would like you to know that when I make a reference like that, I would be very unlikely to say on my own, the president can do this. I want my students to know that there is a literal human being. And as a teacher, I would use whoever is in the office. If it was Carter, I would say Carter should do it, because I think part of our, and especially teenagers, endless anxiety is that there is a single living human being, not an abstract concept called the office of the presidency, but we rest as human beings, you and I, on our goodwill in the intentions and actions of two people, essentially, Gorbachev and whoever is our current president. And I would like to make sure that you know that when I say that, I'm not particularly saying anything about Reagan at all, but I want to particularize the anxiety we live in, and that's the way I would make a political comment. And I would always use the name of whoever it is. I don't think you have a clear sense of my own political leanings. If I told you, you might not believe that I think the only man who's been president that I would vote for in the last 40 years is Eisenhower. Then you would probably not believe me, but that's pretty close to true. Because I was an idol of mine as a child, and I have a lot of affection for many of our modern presidents, personally. But see, my attitude towards the presidency is irrelevant to the issue, and it always has been, and I know that you would see that. But it raises the issue that I want to present to you before we continue, and that is, I decided as a young teacher that I cannot teach literature without two clear angles of attack as a teacher. One is to bring my students to an intellectual perception of what's going on, that understanding. What do these words mean? And I think that in certain classes, teachers can survive with an intellectual approach. I used it when I was at the U, when I would teach seminar-size classes, because in a seminar-size class, you're dealing generally with better students or graduate students who know how to approach an issue, and you don't have to work into emotion. But I decided early on that simply doesn't cut the ice or the mustard, either one. When you're dealing with people who are approaching material for the first time and want to approach it in a way which makes an honest understanding of that work function inside themselves as listeners and as students. I believe that essentially to speak only on the level of intellect is to deny the reasons why literature exists and why people write literature. And so my goal has been for many years, and I hope you've caught this, that I will present the work that we are discussing in the mood that I can create in which it was written. My students believe when I'm doing Jonathan Edwards that I am literally sending them to hell, fire, and brimstone, damnation, because I try to be Jonathan Edwards. And an intellectual analysis of the metaphorical imagery of Jonathan Edwards doesn't do a damn thing for college students or high school students, or I think you, as you encounter what Jonathan Edwards intended of his creation. And I'm aware of the intentional fallacy, and yet it seems to me that the first thing we look at when we're reading literature is the context in which a piece of literature is written. So when we come to material, say, expressing the Christian faith, Paradise Lost, which you just finished, if you read Paradise Lost, and you know the plot, and you understand what goes on, and you have failed to touch in your emotional being the fact that Milton was a devout Protestant in a dangerous world, and that when he says, I want to justify the ways of God to man, he's not doing that just for fun, that he was intensely serious, that you come close to God through Paradise Lost. My goal is to, when I teach Paradise Lost, get the students to see that this was written to move them. It wasn't written to be analyzed. And literature is almost never written to be analyzed unless it's done by James Joyce, right? Or T.S. Eliot. It's written to be experienced, and writers write to get into your interior. My sign of success is what I told you. Did I tell you? Last year, I had a senior, after we finished Paradise Lost, say, I had come to believe that John Milton was inspired by God. And that's more success than I want, right? But that girl got into the spirit of what Milton was trying to do. And for me, if she can attach the emotional response with an understanding of what it is, then she can pull herself away. So I ask of myself and of my students a common pulling away from my personal beliefs. You probably do not know my personal beliefs about what I teach, so I often reflect elements of my beliefs. I suspect you do not know, for example, that there hasn't been a day in my life when I've ever picked up Edgar Allan Poe and read him for my own pleasure. I've taught him with great pleasure. But when I teach Poe, I don't tell the students. I essentially despise this man's manipulation of my fears, which is what his genius is. And I don't read him for pleasure. I don't find him fun. When I teach Emerson with you, I try to teach Emerson in a way which takes you with me into this world where Christianity no longer suffices. It doesn't suffice for Emerson. He gave up the church, and he's trying in the 1830s to find a new way to achieve closeness to what you and I might call God, but he calls it the world soul, the oversoul. And when I do Tennyson, my goal is to help you feel two things in the morning. One is that the old rules don't work. And I try to instill in my students a sense that I need through this poem to find a way to put my feet. And you should feel, if you're reading it or participating in class, alertly, you should feel the insecurity and the unease that Tennyson feels as he tries to work his way to what will be a positive conclusion, but it's a hard trip. The other element I want you to feel is greed. And I think if you're reading Emerson's poem on the death of his son, you should want to cry. How can you respect the man who wrote it if you don't feel tears at the loss of the child he's weeping over? How can you not feel sorry and share in Tennyson's grief over the death of Hallam? And so I would urge you, I would say to anybody who wants to hear me speak, if you want to come to a lecture where you don't have an emotional response, you shouldn't come to my lectures. I won't teach that way. But it does mean that for the moment we share, regardless of our own religious perspective, Milton's perspective, or Tennyson's perspective, today, Tennyson's perspective, not mine. And I was thinking, especially in the context of last week, is the first time I think anybody has ever asked me a personal question about how do you teach this in a Catholic high school, remember? And so really, and that plus the comment about the essential lack of bias that you desire. When you meditate on this for the last week, what can I say? Because I did want to raise it to all of you to help you see what perspective to take. If I say and convince you that Tennyson's unease over the lack of certainty is mine, that's more a teaching success than a personal statement. And I don't think you know what my personal statement might be on that, and I would rather you didn't. But my students, when I do the naturalist and we do the open bowl, they're absolutely convinced that I'm going to go home and commit suicide that night because there's no purpose to life. And that's wrong too. And after I finish, I always try to put, especially the high school kids, in perspective. And now we've encountered America in 1895. You see the point? But I do want you emotionally responding because I think it invalidates the whole purpose of in memoriam if you aren't feeling anything at all when you're hearing it. There should be a tear. And then there should be joy as well. And so I always work with two things. What the author meant in general when he wrote, what's going on in the text, gives the text its own validity. I went to Chicago, and the University of Chicago they influenced me strongly in what do these words mean. And then what you and I take from it, how we come away with the respect and understanding as well. Certainly understanding comes before emotion. But I came to think, as I taught my first years, that if I taught understanding without emotion, they may understand, but they certainly don't remember. And you remember what touched you, not what you were taught on a blackboard. That's how learning takes place. And right this morning, I read an essay from one of my students. It was a very fine statement. We just finished a Cardinal's Tale. This an old man meets three young rioters who insult him, and he says, "I'm looking for death, and I can't find it." And they're looking for death, and they will find it. And the whole point the old man is making is that I walk around and knock with my staff on the ground. And I say to my Mother Earth, "Leva moda, let me in. Dear Mother, let me in. And I can't die. And therefore I live until God chooses that I die." And I had this essay this morning and wrote that reading this, the old man reminded me of Pentecostal. Right? Where Bryant, last year when I taught her that, Bryant talked about death after going to bed to all the people who live. And she said, it also reminded me of Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson, where death is an old gentleman who comes and takes you. And that's the kind of synthesis that a teacher looks for. Any teacher looks for, that somebody has remembered and learned something, not because I wrote it on the board, but because she was moved by Bryant and Dickinson, and now she can, on her own, go all the way back to Chaucer and make it come alive and see things working. So even though I'm grumpy and angry at my students, that's what I'm looking for as a teacher. And that's why, essentially, if you come to a class from me, you can't expect total apoliticalness, though pretty much that, I think. But you certainly can't expect that I will take a cool or casual look at anything that deals with faith. And if you're doing something like Milton, the Bible, in memoriam, that's the issue. But what you can expect is a lot of variety from me, because I will take the position of the text as a teacher. So, that was a long preface, or as they say in the Wife of Bath's Tale, that certainly was a long prologue to a tale. You remember that she goes on for about 4 times as long as her story. Let's go back now to In Memoriam then. We're at the upward swing, and we're going to find some very nice statements. This is a much happier day because while he's not there, he's working towards an understanding of how you incorporate the death of a loved one into your own life. And that's for the great success of In Memoriam. It is hard to read this without thinking of the radical contrast that we get with Walt Whitman. When you read Walt Whitman's When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom, and Whitman expresses this tremendous grief at the death of Lincoln, and pushes in that tremendous, wonderful poem to an aggressive philosophical acceptance. Do you remember the poem? With the thought of death on one side, and hand in hand we go through, and we accept it, we embrace it, which is very Whitmanian. It's not going to be anywhere near that aggressive for Tennyson. It's going to be much more modulated, and I believe, personally, much more real to those of us who've gone through experiences, because Whitman was a professional believer in positive outcomes, and I think Tennyson lives in a world that is emotionally more convincing. So turn to the poem LXXII, 82. He's moving out. I wage not any feud with death. This is page 60 in the handout that I handed you. I wage not any feud with death, for changes wrought on form and face. No lower life that earth's embrace may breed with him can fright my fate. Eternal process moving on, from state to state the spirit walks, and these are but the shattered stalks or ruined chrysalis of one. Nor blame I death, because he bare the use of virtue out of earth. I know transplanted human worth will bloom to profit otherwise. For this alone on death I wreak the wrath that garners in my heart. We put our lives so far apart we cannot hear each other speak. You pull away from these poems that we're doing, essentially doing it by getting closer and backing up. And a poem like this reminds one of the shifting emotional response to loss, because what he's learning is that the death of his friend is essentially not a cosmic tragedy. And he's starting to understand that one bears, because of the nature of things, the evolution and the coming to pass and the going away of things around us endlessly, on a daily basis, do we not? People we don't know, buildings, civilizations rise and fall. And what Tennyson is coming to catch is that if he's going to make his way through the death of Hal to an understanding of death, he's got to see that essentially his cosmic grief is the result of a one-on-one personal loss. It's not even that Hal was dead that he's complaining about here, is it? That I can't talk to my friend. And a lot of us know that sense of distance, which is probably the greatest shock. Probably each one of us has been at the funeral of somebody we loved and felt the need to say goodbye, and then felt that the hardest part of the funeral is that they don't say goodbye back. And I think what he's working on is an understanding of that. My real complaint is that death has separated us from the one I want to talk to. Move on a poem to number 84. And he looks at his possible futures and what he lost. When I contemplate, all alone, the life that had been thine below, and fix my thoughts on all the glow to which thy crescent would have grown, I see thee sitting crowned with good, a central warmth diffusing bliss. In glance and smile and clasp and kiss on all the branches of thy blood, my friend, and partly mine, and now the day was drawing on, and thou shouldst link thy life with one at mine own house, boys of mine, and fabulous uncle on my knee. This is what he lost. In addition to the friend, he's lost the possibility for the future. The children Helen would have had would have been his nephews and nieces. And he would have sat on his knee and said, Uncle Allie. And that's gone. But that remorseless iron hour made cypress of her orange flower, despair of hope, and earth and sea. I seem to meet their least desire, to clasp their cheeks, to call them mine. I see their unknown faces shine beside the never-lighted sight. I see myself as an honored guest, thy partner partner on the flowery walk of letters, genial table talk, or deep dispute and graceful jest. While now thy prosperous labor fills the lips of men with honest praise, and sun by sun the happy days descend below the golden hills, with promise of a morn and fair, and all the train of bounteous hours conduct our paths, growing colors to reverence and silver hair. With gold worn for earthly gold, for lavish mission, richly wrought, leaving great legacies of thought. Our spirit should sail from off the globe. That's our desire in life, isn't it? And our friends go through that entire sequence. I went to a 20th high school reunion, and I had one of those blank out moments. We were looking for our old friend. And I started looking around for Dave Culbert, who I was in grade school with, and was one of my good buddies from third grade up to junior high. And I went to somebody else and said, "Where's Dave?" And then I said, "Well, you know, he was killed right after college." And I just totally phased out that Dave had died. He was killed in a hunting accident, car turned over, a week after college graduation. And I had that moment of, because I forgot, I was looking for a man my age who'd gone through, which one of these balding, paunchy men, right? If Dave, and none of that had happened. And it wasn't even because I didn't know, because I did know, but I sort of blanked it out. It wasn't part of my daily life, and I was kind of curious to see what happened in my elementary school studies. And so I could almost, as he said, remember, he was killed in that car accident. He was the first one of our class. I could almost, in my mind, see the imaginary 20 years go to an event just like that. Because he'll never be a balding, paunchy man, not anything more than 22. And this is what he's looking at, that future that might have happened to Helen. What time mine own might also flee at length with thine, in love and faith, and hovering o'er the dolorous strait to the other shore, resolved indeed. You and I might have died around the same time, and we lived our full lives. Arrive at last the blessed goal, and he that died in Holy Land would reach us out the shining hand, and take us in single soul. Read that and with that. Back. Wherefore wake the old bitterness again, and break the low beginning. I like the way the sonnet starts there again, in particular, because the whole process is the process of memory which recreates the grievous feeling. And he says, what was I reading on? To read on a read is ridiculous. It'll always been. And he makes a kind of willful decision to stop thinking like that, right? I don't stop thinking like that. I'm going to continue. I will be able to create the contempt that I need to survive in life. And he picks up the theme that he picked up earlier, or created earlier. This truth came born with beer and Paul. I felt that when I sorrowed most, it's better to have loved him all. He needs, like many of us do need, a way of saying something to himself to endure those moments when he's going back. It's a code. Code of honor, code of belief, code of faith. If he can remember that, then he won't turn into the what have I lost? I've lost all of Tom's life and the children and our aging together and our gray hairs and our death within a few years when we go together to the bar. Right? Now, I know that even though I lost all that, I'm better off. It's code. Let's pass over a few lyrics. He goes to college in a nice picturesque lyric on number 87. I passed beside the reverend wall, and with a bowl I wore the gown. I roved at random through the town and saw the tumult of the hall. You ever go back to your old college? What used to be fun is now tumult. Yeah. Then heard once more in college saying that the storm their high-built organs make, and thunder music roll and shake the prophet blazoned on the panes. and caught once more the distant shout of the measured pulse of racing oars among the willows. What's he referring to here? This wandering campus. The crew, yeah, we can see the crew on the Thames or the Ham, yeah. Paced the shore, many a bridge, and all about the same gray flash again, and felt the same, but not the same. And last up that long walk of mine our path to see the room, which is well. Go back and see your dormitory room. Put one there. Another game was on the door. I lingered. All within the noise of songs and clapping hands and boys that crashed the glass and the floor. Where once we held debate, a band of youthful friends on mind and art and labor and the changing mark and all the framework of the land. Other people are there. Other rooms are there. Other children are growing, or young men are growing through their own lives, saying pretty much the same thing. I should feel I was back this time the same debate going on. When one would aim an arrow fair extended slackly from the string, and one would pierce an outer ring, and one an inner here and there, and last, the master bowman, he was clean and wide. A willing ear we left him. Nice imagery, isn't it? He says these college conversations were like a group of people shooting arrows at a target with various skills, and each person would get probably within the range, and then the master bowman would step up, and it would be his friend. Of course, he could take that arrow, and pull that string, and bang. And it's one of the great pleasures of college that you are at an age where you can feel free to ask any questions and find any answers. And that's the excitement of intellectual combat is probably at its greatest, isn't it, when you're 20, 21 years old. By the time we reach middle age, we've already made up our minds about so many things that we've lost some of that pleasure. And he's looking back at that. A willing ear we lent him, who but hung to hear the rapt oration, flowing free from point to point, with power and grace, and music in the bounds of law, to those conclusions when we saw the God within him light his face. It seemed to lift the form, the glow, the azure orbit, heavenly lines, and over those ethereal lines, the bar. Let's move on. We've got a couple of others. With lyrics 90 through 95, we see Tennyson pursuing on an increasingly positive mode the relationships between the living and the dead, and the desire for that relationship. When he achieves that sense that he may be able to maintain a continuing relationship, which isn't going to be language, it's not going to be body, but it is going to be understanding, he survives the loss of the person he's loved. That's the most difficult of all the challenges for all of us, to find a way to continue in the presence of one who gives you confidence, happiness. Poets have repeatedly tried to solve this problem. They think it's a poem about sweeping up the heart. You know, the bustle in the house, the morning after death, is powerless to intimacy, enacted upon earth. The sweeping up the heart and putting love away. One will not want to use again for eternity. And I like to teach them the poem because I can ask you, what do you do with the love left when somebody dies? Her subverted image is a broken heart, like a china cup. You can't throw it away, so you sweep it up, put it in the corner someplace, hoping that when eternity comes, you can get it repaired or mended or have a use for it. But the clear image in that lyric by Dickinson is that there's no purpose for it now. That love which is responsive to another person is love which is gone. It's unusable. It's like having an invention from 1900 for which the tool is gone. Right? It's like some archaic structure which we've got but can't use because it's no longer used. My grandpa used to have a lot of old tools in the farm in the garage, and he couldn't throw them out. You know what I'm talking about? And I would say, well, Grandpa, what's that for? Well, that's for, and I wouldn't know, something to do with a horse, probably. And I'd go, why don't you throw that out? Well, no. Useless, but put it aside. Maybe the day will come when we need horses. Doggy whip, that type of thing. And so he pursues some of these. Let's take a look at number 93. It's XCIII in page 54.
Before you get there, what's the amount of threat in 91?
In 91?
Second one.
When Rosie Culbert pumped the arts and rarely pipes the mouth with thrush. He means a thrush up on a tree.
Oh, he's mounted on it.
Yeah. No, I don't
I
think.
kept seeing a stuffed thrush.
No, it doesn't. No, he's not mounted as in what do you call a person with stuff thing? Taxidermy. No, yeah. So a taxidermized thrush would pipe very rarely. I do believe that's true. Okay, 93. He's invocating spirits, in the classic sense of his dead friend. This is on page 64, down the lower right-hand side. Oh, you're missing a page? Well, it's only two stanzas and then we're on page 65. You find that? Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry, that must have the modern instrument failed me there. So these are all audible and understandable. I do not want to miss something. This is number 93 through 96. I shall not see thee. Dare I say no spirit ever breaks the band that saves him from the native land where first he walked and clasped in clay. So that's what we would like to believe, isn't it? That death does not totally remove you from the place where you were born, and the friends that you had. No visual shade of someone lost, but he, the spirit himself, may come where all the nerve of sense is numb. Spirit to spirit, ghost to ghost. Oh, therefore, from thy sightless range with God, an unconjectured bliss. Oh, from the distance of the abyss of tenfold complicated chains, descend and touch and enter. Hear the wish too strong for words to name. And in this blindness of the frame, my ghost may feel my thine near. I particularly like that lyric because I think the need to have a connection with one you love. Come down, across, he says, unconjectured bliss. The distance between you and me, wherever heaven may be, is obviously bliss for Helen. Now, I know I don't believe in ghosts, Tennyson says. But could your spirit come down anyway and give me power or give me strength? When my mom died when I was a kid, I remember for a couple of years I actually strongly wanted to believe that she could see me. If I did well on a test, I had this sense that she wasn't gone, that she would know that I was doing well. And part of the reason I wanted to do well in school was that I felt she was kind of watching over me. And I don't know how I feel about that as an adult. Now I'm glad she doesn't watch over me. But the desire to be able to call the one that you, right, the one you miss, and say, give me a connection or a strength. How pure, this is 94 now. How pure at heart and sound in head, with what divine affection bold should be the man whose thought would hold an hour's communion with the dead. If you're good enough, maybe you can get that with the dead person, right? But you have to have the strength of 10, right? Because your heart is pure. In vain shalt thou, or any, call the spirits from their golden day. Except like them, thou too canst say, my spirit is at peace with all. They haunt the silence of the breath. The imagination is calm and fair. The memory like a cloudless air. The conscience as a sea at rest. But when the heart is full of din and doubt beside the portal waits, they can but listen at the gate and hear the household die again. I think what he's working on here is interesting. You can't call the peaceful dead the happy dead unless you can somehow assign it yourself to that mood. Tennyson can't expect Helen to visit them if the house is jar, here it is jarring, not something you put something in. Just stay away. And I think what's happening is kind of interesting because in a world where he no longer has a Christian religion available to him, he's getting an impulse, isn't he, toward changing his interior state which isn't far different from what you've always got from pictures and rabbis, right? And say, hey, pull up your inside, get down, get control of yourself. It's a 19th century version of a motivation to arrange your peaceful soul. I think I partly catch at this moment is that the intensity of the grief that makes one distraught at the death of a friend has to be fought, because unless one fights it, one will never acquire the serenity of spirit to make the connection that you're looking for. You can't scream and holler and expect Helen to hang around, not in his soul or his spirit. No profit to him if you're so busy staring at your bereaved navel, right? That you won't look out at what he might have for you. I find this an interesting shape you're going through. In the next poem, number 95, is the climactic poem. This is where you bring yourself around. Now, it's an important one. And it's a fairly long one. We'll take it on to page 66. Yeah, page 66. Okay, so we'll need to listen for this. I'm sorry, this is taking a minute. By night we lingered on the lawn, for underfoot the herb was dry, and genial warmth, and o'er the sky the silvery haze of summer dawn. The quality of Tennyson that is constantly named in your copy almost never rings a sour note. Some of the greatest poets will come off the line and stop. And Tennyson doesn't seem to have the capacity of bringing a sour note, and yet his language is so natural, and it doesn't stand for so ordinary, and yet it creates such a clear image of the weather and the beauty of that evening. By night we lingered on the lawn, for underfoot the earth was dry and genial warmth, and o'er the sky the silvery haze of summer dawn, and calm that let the papers burn unwavering, not a cricket stirred. The brook alone far off was heard, and on the board a fluttering herring. And bats went round in fragrant skies, and wheels, or lit the filmy shapes that haunt the dusk with ermine capes, and woolly beasts, breasts, and bearded eyes. Well, now we sang old songs that pealed from knoll to knoll, where, couched at ease, the white kine glimmered, and the trees laid their dark arms about the field. It's all one sentence, isn't it? It's glorious, isn't it? I don't know, so don't anybody ask me what he means by and on the board of fluttering herring. Anybody know what that means?
Deer.
Of course. Oh, well, I was saying, I don't understand that line. You're right, of course. Yeah. Gentle sound. So that makes it a lot better. I'll think of a funeral herring. And the thought of a funeral herring fluttering away is very unnerving to me. Yeah. What is the white kine? You know the word kine? The old wedding word for cows. And you know what he means by and calm that let the papers burn away? Papers are thin and so perfectly quiet, beautifully thin. But when those others, one by one, withdrew themselves from me at night, and in the house, light after light went out, and I was all alone. Hunger seized my heart. I read of that glad year which once had been, and those fallen leaves which kept their green, the noble lessons of the dead. And strangely, on the silence, broke the silent speaking word. And strange was love's dumb cry, divine change, test his word. And strange is full the faith, the vigorous, bold to dwell on doubts that drive the coward back, and keen through wordy snares to track suggestion to her inmost self. What's he doing? He's reading letters, beautifully reading letters, and hearing the voice. Hearing the voice. So word by word, and line by line, the dead man touched me from the past. All at once it seemed at last a living soul and flashed on mine. And lying in this was wound, and whirled without imperial heights of thought, and came on that which is, and caught the deep pulsation of the world. This is what James Joyce calls an epiphany. You know the phrase, the word? The epiphany is that moment that comes to you often
a moment which you have been psychologically preparing for without knowing it for ages. But it comes to you like a small mound of TNT. You don't know what's going on in your interior, and yet illumination comes, and the illumination gives you very powerful, great insights. And this epiphany here, I think it is an epiphany. I don't think he understands what's happening. I think it's quiet. His friends are gone. I think I'll read Hal's letters. And as he sits down, he hears the voice comes through the silent words. All of a sudden, the connection is there. There is a connection. Hal can speak to him. He does have access to the person he loves so much and so dearly. And you notice he says, the soul seems flashed on him. Interesting word. A flash. It's a visual image, isn't it? And his is wound in it. Now, I'm thinking of that image of the spiral helix. It's declining and moving up. And whirled about imperial heights of thought, and came on that which is, and caught the deep pulsation of the world. Aeonian music measuring out the depths of time. What's happened is that, if you recall his worries last week, he looked at the world around him and he said, I don't see any structure here at all. I see nature saying everything comes and goes, and I don't have any pity for the individual, and what the heck, I don't have any pity for the species either. And as he in his grief, Tennyson looks and says, well, there's no structure here. This is the post-Darwinian world. Right? You can't go to the Bible and find that the Bible says the earth has been around so many years, and no, they don't care. And now, with Hal's letter coming in, he starts to catch that there is. It may not have been in the format that we used to believe, the structure of things, we need things, but there is a connection, that nature itself speaks to itself and has its own rhythms. You notice he says, he catches the pulsation of the world. Pulsation is an interesting word, but you can only refer to your own heart. The beat of nature or of life, which goes about its business, and yes, it will not stop for the dinosaurs, and it will not stop for Hallam or Tennyson or you or me, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something that keeps the world in proper relationship to itself. All the same. Aeonian music. Music is mathematics, right? The Aeonian, the eons of time, huh? Mathematics, the structure of the universe, measuring out the steps of time. And it's not uncontrolled. He doesn't have access to traditional Christian language for this, so he sees himself as a Christian, and he's not philosophically having access to it. And my daughter right now is going through this. She's learning the flute in 3 weeks. Right? Go home every night and she sits there with her flute. And all she can do is go, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, D. And I'm being driven crazy by these endless 3-note melodies, but I'm very pleased she's doing it. We're real happy. She loves her flute. But that she's getting a sense of time. 4, 4, 2, 2, right? 6, 8. Structure. Music is based on mathematics. It is based on order. So you might not think it if you listen to a high school band. But it really is, all the same. Aeonian music measuring out the steps of time, the shocks of chance, the blows of death. At length my trance was cancelled, stricken through with doubt. Vague words, but how hard to frame in matter-molded forms of speech, or even for intellect to reach through memory that which I became. We don't mean, one of the key points about moments of epiphany is that you can't hang on to them forever. Right? It's impossible. Luckily, we know that we can go back and pick them up, like listening to a great symphony. You can repeat it, but you can't get that moment of greatness in a symphony and carry it on permanently. It's the nature of life. So he loses it. But he still has the presence of it in his heart that he can go back to. Vague words, but how hard to frame in matter-molded forms of speech, or even for intellect to reach through memory that which I became. Till now,
The doubtful dusk revealed the knolls once more, where couched at ease the white kine glimmered. The trees laid their dark arms about the field. Now we're on 66. And sucked from out the distant gloom a breeze began to tremble o'er the large leaves of the sycamore and fluctuate all the still perfume. Now we're coming to the real dawn, actual dawn. He's got that experience and he can come back, he can look outside and see the sun's going to rise. And gathering freshly overhead, rocked the full foliaged elms and swung the heavy folded rose and flung the lilies to and fro and said, the dawn, and died away. And east and west, without a breath, mixed their dim lights like life and death to broaden into boundless day. Somehow we need an integration of spirit knowing. And he looks out, after having read and come close to how he looks out, he sees that that's the way the world works. That's the natural function of things. East and west create the day. The trees, the sycamore, the elm, the lilies, they bring themselves together. And as a result now, with number 96, the weak Tennyson has died. And we have a redeemed Tennyson, if you can use language like that. He's made over again as a result of his insight into the image of Hallam. He is going to be using Hallam as a standard for himself. Somebody, I'm not sure who he's referring to, probably his wife. Do you say it? Emily Fellow? This is his wife. He married Rebecca. Yeah. So here's a man going through tremendous grief, and naturally there's a woman who's saying, "No, this devil, right? I'm a good believer, and you're not, so you must be going to hell." Emerson hated people who would do that, and apparently Tennyson is just kicking his wife a little bit for her sublime, ignorant self-confidence, right? I'm going to call it that. Sweetheart is you, whose light blue eyes are tinted over drowning flies. You can say, is Tennyson capable of mild sarcasm? Yeah. Emily was weep over flies. You tell me, thou devil born, I know not. What indeed I knew, in many a subtle question verse, you touched with jarring lyre at first, but ever strove to make it true. Perplexed in faith, but pure in deed. At last you beat his music out. There lives more faith in honest doubt to lead me than half the creed. This is classic 19th century, and he's working towards this, is he not? It's just, what's the problem with Hallam? Well, Hallam didn't start out. You know what it's like not to begin your music beautiful? Listen to my daughter. And eventually, I hope she's a good flautist. But right now, it's all dissonance, and she can't keep in one range. She flips up and down, and I play clarinet, and I know the same problem, even after years. But a good musician works through dissonance, through the difficulty of mastering the instrument until he's in charge. And Tennyson is trained with people who say, well, how could Hallam be an example for life when you begin with skepticism or pessimism or doubt, and you're unable to believe with automatic faith? Tennyson says you can't believe in automatic faith unless you're like Emily, apparently, who's been told what to believe, and then goes around pointing her finger at people who don't believe automatically. And I'm sure you've heard these last lines before. Tennyson is saying the process of faith that I'm working through here is one which says essentially that half the creeds that people believe are meaningless. And the key word, I think, here is there is more faith in honest doubt. And simple faith which has never had an honest doubt is not real faith compared to the faith that automatically takes everything is told. He's pushing his own standards here, as you can see. He of course refers to Hallam and refers to who? To whom? Himself, sure. He fought in doubt the
would not make his judgment blind. He faced the specters of the mind and laid them. Thus he came at length to find a stronger faith to know. And power was with him in the night, which makes the darkness and the light, and dwells not in the light alone. That is, power was with him in the night, which makes the darkness and the light, and dwells not in the light alone, but in the darkness, and the cloud, and the from Sinai, peak, O Israel, made their God and gold, although the trumpet grew so long. The difficulty he's addressing here, and it's time to stop for the first half, is that he needs a faith which will somehow come to terms with the night as well as the day. And he cannot respond to people who see the presence of faith in the context only of sunny days, warm nights, right? Everything happy and blissful. Because life has told Helen that this is not reality. He apparently had that faith before Helen died. And the kind of faith which only lives in the warm June days of summer cracks apart and is destroyed when the reality of something like the death of Helen faces you. So you need a faith which can endure the night as well as the day. And that's what Helen will be, the real faith, whatever it might be. But it's not going to be the easy one that you learn in Sunday school. You see how he's working it. And Helen, of course, is going to give him this answer. We have some more nice poems to bring us out in the next hour.
Doesn't that mean faith by conviction?
Yes, bringing yourself to conviction. Yes, that's right. Copies of it are almost full copies since I apparently skipped a couple of pages. And we are not reading a lot of the poems. The dilemma or the difficulty, obviously, is how do you do it when there's not somebody talking it through with you. I have to admit that I've never found the quiet reading in front of the fireplace of In Memoriam totally successful. But I have found talking about it and reading it out loud to you or in other classes very successful. I think I would just urge you to, if you enjoyed this, to go home and pick up some of the moments and follow through if you can. And maybe one of the secrets is to do it out loud. Tennyson is an extraordinarily euphonic poet. When I'm teaching Americans, I always say that Longfellow is American Tennyson without genius. Tennyson is Tennyson with genius. And that means that the effort of reading Tennyson is well rewarded if you take the time to bring yourself into his mood. Tennyson will not take you to great heights of ridiculous joy, because that's not his tone, but he will reward your reading. And if you read him out loud, what you'll catch, I hope and have caught, is that he is extraordinarily beautiful in his use of the ordinary English language. He's a marvelous, marvelous writer. We're going to skip over quite a few now to bring ourselves closer to the end. On number 99, XCIX on page 67, we get the anniversary of the death again. We'll pass over that. And on page 69, number 104, we see the third Christmas, which I'm going to read because we've read the other two Christmases. 3 years have passed, or 3 Christmases have passed. The time draws near the birth of Christ. The moon is hid. The night is still. A single church below the hill is pealing, folded in the mist. A single peal of bells below that wakens at this hour of rest, a single murmur in the breast. But these are not the bells I know. Like strangers' voices, here they sound in lands where not a memory strays, nor landmark breathes of other days, with all new unhallowed ground. This Christmas he's not at home. And the whole point of ritual celebrations, I think, is to give you a touch on this ringing beat of time, pulsation. The older you get, you know how important that is, that once again Christmas has come. And when you do that, you stop and pause and say, where am I now? Sometimes you even write these long letters and mimeograph them off to say, this is where I've been. And the process of writing those letters is probably more interesting than the process of receiving them. But the writing of them, the
the writing of them is a very important moment in time. And you may do this at New Year's Eve, New Resolutions, thinking of past. And at this point, of course, 3 Christmases after Alan's death. At Christmas, certain things happen. First okay. And you notice the way the lyric expresses it, he's almost shocked that that's not the right bell. You expect certain sound. He expects the bell of his church, and it's different. And what it does is bring up just a moment of memory that this is unhallowed ground. He's not in England, he's not at home. And the grief that he felt so intense in the first one, and then which was modulated, nobody cried, second Christmas. Now it's just a moment of remembrance, isn't it? And I'm someplace else, and time goes on. It's a nice little piece.
Where do you think he is?
I think
That's very mind-blowing that he says Walton Abbey Church is a new home of the country.
well, they moved to.
Yeah, well, in other words, he's still in England.
He's still in England, yeah. Did I say he wasn't in England?
No, but I wasn't when I
Yeah.
read it.
I don't know, but as soon as you said that, I thought he's got to be in Italy.
Yeah.
Where else would alien country be? On page 70, you have another one of those moments that one always thinks. In this case, it's February 7th, 107 on the top of the page. This is the birthday of Hal. And birthdays probably are the days of greatest memory for people who died. I would stop and think of that, to refer to that. And the one following this helps us move again in a more confident fashion. You see number 108. I will not shut me from my kind. Unless I stiffen into stone, I will not eat my heart alone, nor feed with sighs a passing wine. Lose their wind. Interesting image there, because one wonders whether or not that's where Stephen Crane got his image of him coming. Remember his little poem where he comes across this creature, bestial, squatting, eating his heart in his hand, and he says, "Why are you eating your heart?" And he says, "I eat it because it is bitter, and because it is my heart." This marvelous Crane sort of surrealistic photographs, and maybe Crane got this from Tennyson. I wouldn't be surprised. Crane was the child of a Methodist minister, I believe, and they would certainly have encountered Tennyson in their family. I will not shut me from my kind, and lest I stiffen into stone, I will not eat my heart alone, nor feed with sighs a passing wind. What profit lies in barren faith and vacant yearning, though with might to scale the heaven's highest heights, nor dive below the wells of death? What find I in the highest place but mine own phantom chanting hymns? And on the depths of death there's room beneath that of a human faith. I'll rather take what fruit may be, or sorrow under human skies, to tell that sorrow makes us wise, whatever wisdom suits us. We're looking at the determinations. I like this over a lot. That is, he's determined not to move off into solipsistic isolation of emotion, isn't he? You make it, I'll stick it out right here, like the old man in the Partners have, who says, "I've tried to get Mother Earth to take me in death because I'm weary, but she won't, and so I'll wait until my time has come." I think Tennyson is pursuing that acceptance of the nature of a life as it passes on. So we move on toward the end now of In Memoriam, and with page 72, we'll see him getting a new confidence and a new willingness to pursue real life, ordinary life. Number CXVII 117. No, let's go back and do 150 on the left-hand column, because that's a nice nature poem. We'll catch new confidence in it. Now fades the last strong, now fades the last long streak of snow. Now burgeons every maze and quick about flowers, squares, and thick by ashen roots the violets glow. Now rings the woodland loud and long, the distance takes a lovelier hue, and drowned in yonder living blue, the lark becomes
the sea-mew pipes, or dives in yonder, where now the sea-mew pipes or dives in yonder green gleam, and fly the happy birds that change their sky to build and brood, that live their lives from land to land. And in my breast, spring wakens too, and my regret becomes an April violet, and buds and blossom like the rest. The nice image of spring, but April is the cruelest month too, isn't it? And so you start, it's only an April violet after all, and you don't want to make too big a deal of it, but you do remember, and you start feeling the sense of loss. We feel loss greater in spring than other times, because spring is when the cycles of nature come back, but we who cycle ourselves up are not recyclable, are we? And now it's gone. Is it then regret or buried time that keenlier and sweet April waits and meets the year and gives and takes the colors and crests of time? Not all. The calm, stirring air, the light reorient out of dust, cry to the sense to heart and trust in that which made the world so fair. Not all regret. The face will shine upon me while I muse alone, and that dear voice I once had known still speaks in me of you and mine. Yet less of sorrow lives in me for days of happy commune dead, less yearning for the friendship fled, and some strong bond is to be. Here is the knowledge. The bond stays, so I lose the active communion and the friendship that is still here. There's a connection. And it's going to be very nice now as we move on. Oh, days and hours, your work is this, to hold me from my proper place a little while of his embrace for fuller gain of after bliss. What is his proper place? Good talent, absolutely death, and ultimately it's going to be all of our proper places. But the purpose of life's days and hours as they go on is to keep him here, to prepare him essentially for the proper fuller life, peaceful spirit, getting ready to be with him. That out of distance might ensue desire of nearness, doubly sweet, and unto meeting when we meet, delight 100-fold accrue. For every grain of sand that runs, and every span of shade that feels, and every kiss of two that reels, and all the courses of the mountain. These traditions all have to come around. Now he will be all the happier when the time comes, because of every grain of sand that runs through the hourglass, and pushed him farther on in time. He's willing to accept life, because he's come to believe that there is a connection to spirit that makes it worthwhile. So feel the confidence when you come to the next lyric. Contemplate all this work of time, the giant laboring in his youth, nor dream of human love and truth as dying nature is earth and lime. But trust that those we call the dead are breathers of an ampler day, forever goes with him. Shady solid earth, whereon we tread, its tracks of human feet began, and grew to seeming random forms, the seeming prey of cyclic storms, till at the last arose the man, who strode and branched from clime to clime, the herald of a higher race, and of himself in higher place, if so he typed this work of time within himself, more and more, or crowned with attributes of woe, my glory moves its course and shows that life is not an idle bore, that iron dug some central gloom, and heated hot with burning fears, and dipped in baths of hissing tears, and battered with the shocks of doom, to shape and use, arise and fly the reeling fawn, the sensual beast, move upward, working of the beast, and let the ape and tiger die. What you're catching, I think, if you go through it, is that the marvelous balance in this long poem. You have to go back 3 weeks or 2 weeks to catch catch it, but if you look at nature and the history of nature, what the anthropologists and geologists tell you, and from one perspective, if you're in the wrong mood, it's all chaos, isn't it? And there just doesn't seem to be any structure. In nature, it's red and tooth and claw. If the wrong little lamb is in the wrong place, the hyena will get it. It's gone for good. But what he does is show that a lot of that is attitudinal, and it's relative to your business. By the time you get to the end of the poem, he says you can go to the same nature that seems so meaningless when you're thinking about the random loss of the one you love, and bring yourself emotionally through that experience and find not only is there structure, there is a kind of glory in the structure of things. And when he says they say, he's talking about for him, I suppose, the most modern speculations of the creation of the world and of the species of the world. He goes far beyond dinosaurs and species. He goes right to the time the earth was molten lava and nothing more. And it's very interesting that he does this and pushes it. He says, they say the solid earth whereon we tread in tracks of fluent heat began. That's where it all began, and somehow it moved from that to us. And the implication in the poem is that given that progress, that pulsation, or that rhythm, we could go from here to someplace even better if we have the right angle of vision on where we are and where we're going and understand it broadly enough. I do have to chuckle when I read it because Tennyson is so modern in his uncertainties and so 19th century in his securities. I hear, don't you hear this from the 90s, work hard, work for the night is coming, right? The real solution ultimately is to pick up your pick and start chopping away because there's a job to be done. And I can hear Carlyle and other people of that 19th century saying, finally, what do we do with life? And it's a great stanza, but still, it's 19th century. It's the industrial age, isn't it? You get up in the morning, do your job, it's over. You get a day's pay for a day's work, and everything will be just fine. No. Life is not as idle ore. A nice image. Life is not, I think idle ore can mean unused metals, right? Life is not just random. It's not molten iron waiting to be dribbled away. It's dug. And look at the connection between the image of metals and the emotion these metals are created from. It's iron dug from gloom, heated hot with burning fears, dipped in baths of hissing tears, and battered with the shocks of doom. You have to go through gloom and fears and tears and doom to shape and use. And that's the reality of life. It doesn't come like his blue-eyed darling with innocent, simple faith. It comes with hard work and a lot of emotional shocks, including doom, I guess, for all of us. That makes it possible for him in the next one to bring us back to poem number 7, which was his tremendously low, depressing drive to the doorway of his friends when he is no longer there. He's there like a thief, remember? In the empty streets and the hopelessness of his feeling. Doors where my heart was used to beat so quickly. Not as one that weeps, I come once more. The city sleeps. I smell the meadow in the street. I hear chirp of birds. I see betwixt the black fronts long withdrawn a light blue lane of early dawn. Think of early days and thee. And bless thee. For thy lips are bland, and bright the friendship of thine eye. And in my thoughts, with scarce a sigh, I take the pressure of thine hand. What has he understood? Well, he's never going to have this pressure, is he? And the great grief is the grief of the loss of the two hands. Hands, right, I used to take. They're warm and flesh-filled, and that was the connection. He still can make a connection, can't he? But he can't make it here. He's got to make it here. And the whole attitude towards mourning has changed, isn't it? Instead of being blank, through the blank streets breaks the ball street breaks the blank day. Now what does he hear? Birds chirping, the snow meadows. Senses are very strong. There's life rather than death. The other one is all a poem of emptiness and loss, and this one is a poem of vitality
and life. The senses are alert. He couldn't hear any sound of morning except the crude ones of the city when he was there before. Now he hears natural sounds, birds twittering in the morning. So at 123, down the bottom of that page, 73, evolution, which was a difficult scientific experience, has become a dream. The new science, the post-Darwinian world, it's all become distant. There rolls the deep, where grew the tree. This is true, is it not? Or vice versa. You know, half of America apparently was at one time a huge inland sea. O earth, what changes hast thou seen? There where the long street roars have been the stillness of the central sea. The hills are shadows, and they flow from form to form, and nothing stands. They melt like mist, the solid land, like clouds. They shape themselves and go. But in my spirit will I dwell and dream my dreams, and hold it true, and though my lips may breathe adieu, I cannot think the thing farewell. That's also a particularly interesting lyric. What has happened is that external realities become ephemeral and unreal. Internal changes are denied. See what's happening? If you step back and look at the earth and what's real, I mean, these Rocky Mountains are going to disappear. Give us enough time, just like the Appalachians did not practically walk through them, can't you? And we know that the Olympics are rising fast and they will fall someday. So that the reality of the earth is so what? So what? What lasts? Not the mountains. My relationship to you lasts. That's other life. I cannot say farewell. You have to choose your reality. He had chosen the wrong reality at the beginning, and therefore he was in tremendous difficulty, because you can't have a relationship with the earth, the Rocky Mountains. And the realities have to be human realities, independent of the shift. That which we dare invoke to bless, our dearest faith, our ghastliest doubt, he, they, one, all, within, without, the power in darkness, whom we get. But you invoke. If he's giving you any option you want, you doesn't particularly care whether your faith might be heavy. But what it is you invoke for strength, whether it's a we, a they, a it, or an us. I found him not in the world or sun, or eagle's wings, or insect eye, nor through the questions men may try, the petty cobwebs to that sun. The air and faith and palm trees. I heard a voice, be no more, and heard the ever-breaking shore that tumbled in the godless sea. A warmth within the breast would melt the freezing reasons cold their heart. And like a man in wrath, the heart stood up and answered, I have felt. No, my child, without fear. But that blind clamor made me wise. Then was I the child that cried, the crying knows his father near. And when I am beheld again, what it is that no man understands, and out of darkness in the hand, at least through nature, molding men. Remember what is a child? Like a child crying in the night. There's no language to cry. Now, do you still cry? Yes, but what do children know? Daddy's over there. There is a connection, if you can see the connection. Children don't usually cry in their cribs without somehow coming to understand very quickly that if they do it long enough, one of those two people will get up and change his diapers. And he's reaching that sense of awareness. Whatever I have said or sung, some bitter notes my harp would give, yea, though there seemed to live a contradiction in the tongue, yet hope had never lost her youth. She did but look through dimmer eyes, or love, but played with gracious lies, because he felt so fixed in truth. And if the song were full of care, he breathed the spirit of the song. And if the words were sweet and strong, he set his royal signet there, abiding with me till I sail to seek thee on the mystic deeps, and this electric force that keeps 1,000 pulses dancing fail. Love is and was my Lord and King. And in his presence I attend to hear the tidings of my friend, which every hour his couriers bring. Love is and was my King and Lord, and will be, though as yet I keep within his court on earth, and sleep encompassed by his faithful guard. And hear at times a sentinel who moves about from place to place, and whispers to the world of space in the deep night that all is well. And all is well, though faith and form be sundered in the night of fear. Well roars the storm to those that hear a deeper voice across the storm. And that's what the 19th century is striving for more than anything. It's a time of storm and rage, but the storm can rage if you can hear through the storm. And that's what he's saying his faith is. Love is the substratum of reality for him. Proclaiming social truth shall spread and justice, even though thrice again the red fool fury of the sin should pile her barricades of the dead. Very specifically 19th century, isn't it? Here at this time where you look at the world around you and you see endless injustice. The barricades of Paris. I assume he's talking here about the Communards. Is that the historical moment? People write, and they murder and massacre each other. And he says, I can look at that historical phenomenon and still believe. Part of right. Because I can still believe that justice is there. But ill for him that wears a crown, and him, the Lazar, in his rags. They tremble with the staining crag. The spires of ice are toppled down and molten up and roar and flood. Fortress crashes from on high. The rude earth lightens to the sky, and the great eon sinks in blood, encompassed by the fires of hell. Now thou, dear spirit, happy star, I look at the tumult from afar and smile, knowing all is well. Well, that's Emersonian perspective. If there ever was Emersonian perspective. I've begun reading 6 novels that a friend of mine had written for years, and I put it off because I wanted to start these huge things when I was talking. But I finished the first one last night. This is the Balkan Trilogy by Olivia Manning. Have you read any of Olivia Manning? She's been dead now about 5 years. And she has 6 novels, the Balkan Trilogy and the Levant Trilogy. And they follow the fortunes of a young husband and wife who are trapped in Romania at the beginning of World War II. He's an English lecturer in Bucharest. And so they show the strange angle of vision which must have been present in the parts of Europe that weren't at the action. Not in Paris, not in London, not in Berlin, but down in Bucharest, in the wrong country at the wrong time. The Germans are going to come and take over. And when I was looking over this and thinking of you, I thought of this book, and I was finishing last night, the sense that these two people have a way of surviving, and they will survive, even though Europe is going to go crashing around them. Guy Pringle and his wife Harriet are going to make it through, and I know they will because they're still alive in the last book. So I think they're going to make it through because they have a way of seeing through, I suppose you call it someone's business. You could have said Guy Pringle was one of the truest of the saints in modern literature. That he's able to go through the destruction around him, finding his feet on a time when Europe was literally falling apart. I thought, boy, that's very similar to what he's saying. You can look at the tragedies of the French Revolution, things going on in Europe by 1849, isn't that the awful year? And say, yeah, okay. Yeah. Avoid the humor of this line, and you start seeing there is no truth to it. It must go on. Number 129, middle of the column on 75. We're now at the end. We're moving along towards the end. Dear friend, far off, my lost desire, so far, so near in woe and weal, so love the most, when most I feel there is the lower and the higher.
known and unknown, human, divine, sweet, human, hand and eye, lips and eye, dear heavenly friend that has not died, mine, forever, ever mine. Strange friends, past, present, and to be, love deeplier, darklier understood. Behold, I dream a dream of good, and mingle all the world with thee. And number 31. O living will that shalt endure when all that seems shall suffer shock, rise from the spiritual rock, flow through our deeds and make them pure, that we may lift from out of dust a voice as unto him that hears, a cry above the conquered years, to one that with us works in trust, with faith that comes of self-control, the truths that never can be proved, until we close with all we loved, and all we flow from, soul to soul, soul in soul. I'll ruin the last line, actually. There's the 19th century, and there's the dilemma. What's the key to the difficulty? Faith that never can be proved. No longer is the Bible sufficient, or what the priest says, or the pastor. Each person has to make it through himself. And it's faith that comes of self-control. I find that an interesting way of phrasing it. That is, you have to bring yourself back to an intellectually sane and emotionally sane perspective. The Greek, which is lack of self-control, prevents you from having faith. Some of us, I would imagine, would think that faith might come from giving up self-control, from giving up the ego or the possession of self, and that whatever faith comes from won't speak to you when you're in charge. But not the Tennyson. Tennyson tends to say that you get it by pulling back and putting your feet down. Essentially, the spirit is one which does not trust uncontrolled emotion. But get it down, and you can come with me. I don't know if it's a paradox that we can accept or not in the 20th century. We will find an intellectually respectable way to come to terms with the need all of us have for faith, because it's intellectually respectable. The emotions are real, but you have to understand it up here in a way that you can live with on a daily basis when you're not dealing through emotional state. It's an interesting phenomenon. It should speak very much to us, but most of us have to face the phenomenon one way or another ourselves anyway. And I'm uncertain myself how I feel about the resolution of it, though I do believe that his clear and confident assertion of access in spite of law, and that's what he's saying in these last two lyrics. He has access to him, doesn't he? He's available to him. He's available to remind him of love, and to remind him of his will to have a kind of faith. So the long reading of In Memoriam is worth it. It's a long haul, I think. But I don't think anybody can read Victorian poetry without thinking that, and facing this poem, and everything else comes out of it. And certainly this is the philosophical and emotional center of the 19th century. When you're coming to it, whether you're going to Dickens or Eliot or Thackeray or even Jane Austen, in some way it's what Tennyson's offering us here. It's a pity more people don't read them, because it does merit the thought. Do you have any comments about the whole thing as we move through it? Any comments or feelings about it in the morning, Barry?
I wonder if the friendship between these two men was so strong. That's how they think friendship between men today. Was it because his wife feeling and he treated her? He feared what they're wrong in thought. He didn't promise him this much. He didn't get him much in the way of explanation. Did that come to the effect of that message?
Well, I think that was the time where we're really touchy, few, educated women.
Yes, I know.
And we're just beginning to get to the point where it's respectable to have a brain to do. I mean, we've got a long way to go yet.
And I think, I don't know, as we're speaking in the break, I think marriages in which the husband and wife are intellectually open and equal are few and far between today. They can both be intelligent, but when they're living together as a marital couple,
There are a lot of dangers, I think, in living the same intellectual world. Patty and I do not talk about literature. She doesn't read literature. She reads, but she doesn't read what I teach. She talks about fifth grade. And I think partly because if she responds to it in a way which I thought was ridiculous, what would it do to our marriage? And so I suspect a lot of women who are highly competent today don't touch their husband's expertise and vice versa. I mean, I'm really very poor actually on that. I don't want to fight for ever say you did that wrong. I'm joking.
And you don't speak French to her.
And I don't speak French with her either. That's true. We don't fight. So I think that if the impulse that creates the poem is probably not created through his wife. I think what he's talking about is the extraordinary bonding you can get between good friends when you're young. People go to school. I didn't think. But usually women and men, traditionally, because of the social groupings of the young. I think also we need to remember that he took the death of Hallam as an intellectual experience, and as a writer he expanded on it and used it for the art. Tennyson tells us this is not the shape of how he felt. This is how he shaped how he felt. There's a difference. People would have a tendency, it was probably a conservative death too. Yeah. Yeah. The difference is that traditionally when they did this, they did it in a literary context to distance the friendship. So when Shelley writes at Aeneas about peace, it's all in pastoral settings where every element is predetermined by the genre you choose. And there's no confusion between Shelley and Keats, except that Keats is dead and it's too bad. And I want to sing. Which side, man? He's dead. Milton writes Lycidas, the same thing. What Tennyson did was say, I want this person. He humanized it. This is the mid-romantic period, and now you bring it to the personal experience. And so what Tennyson doesn't do is just to give him the name of a shepherd, and say, my shepherd is dead. And Hal wasn't a shepherd. He was a schoolmate. And he wants to make that personal experience come alive. I think that's a compliment.
I was thinking of Julius Caesar, where Cassius says to Brutus, you have not given me the show of love as you were wont. Mm-hmm. That was an expression. Now that goes back to Shakespeare, which spans 4 centuries up to Tennyson, but it's that our time is so nervous about the use of love that we send it to shame.
Very insecure.
Yeah.
Very
absolutely. So you can't hug another man, for example.
I believe Tennyson would be appalled at a lot of what people think about something like this today, and even in his own day, people are quick to. But that's a willful misreading, is it not? Because I don't see anything in here except why love. Why can't men love each other? If my best friend dies, why can't I cry? That's right. It would have been a member. In fact, it's engaged to his sister. So, yeah. I think Tennyson would say, unless you do that, unless you go through, how will you ever solve the problem? Because people need to have this disease process. And you need to say, I love this person, and he's gone. Sure. Well, men are taught, don't you dare feel like this, or we will faint. But that's astonishing, but it's really true today. I saw a hand out this time. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say about the wife. He wasn't married to her at the time he wrote this, because he was married in 1850, the year this was coming. Of course, he'd been writing it all along, and also the year he became laureate. So the wife of that, she is the new bond, no doubt. But just the same, when you spend 10 years just thinking about a guy, I'm not so sure, and he was an apostle after all, and we all remember about the apostle of Cambridge. So how do we know? It doesn't matter. We can read what we know in this poem.
It doesn't matter in the long run. And you can't blame her for wondering from the outside. Is that what you said? Yeah. I mean, you've been spending 15 years writing this poem of grief. Maybe there's something wrong with you. You need to see a psychiatrist. But it is relevant. It's irrelevant. It essentially is. Students of today have a strong curiosity about that teacher whenever anything about male offenders comes up. And a lot of teachers' time is saying it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. Could be 11 disciples. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I like going through the essays and the cycle and stuff. I have a tendency to enjoy poems that do take a long time to work through, like I found myself. Any other comments on that? Should we end with another interesting poem? Do you remember the poem Tithonus? Let's take a look at Tithonus, which is one of the most extraordinarily beautiful poems, and it's a very sad poem. I'm tempted not to do it because of that, but I would like you to have encountered it. You all remember Ulysses, don't you? Okay. Well, I Xeroxed off Ulysses and Tithonus, and as long as you know Ulysses, I'll introduce you to this one, which was my favorite poem by Tennyson when I was in college. I only have about 13 of these left, so some of you may have it already. Just pass it around. Maybe two people could look on. And it's on the second sheet. It's Tithonus, Tithonus. When I first thought about doing Tennyson with you, the first thought came to mind was in the morning. And then I thought, no, they will not be interested in 3 days on this thing. So I thought, well, we'll do some Tennyson monologue. Because the monologue was a big form, and if we do Browning in the spring, that's what we'll primarily do, is some straight monologue, tradition orders at school and back to the church and stuff like that, with the people speaking their voice. And then I thought, no, I don't want to do the monologue. And so we've got some wonderful ones, the Lotus, Oinoni. I thought I do want to try in memoriam, but to give you a taste of monologue, I think Tennyson had his most seductive days as a writer is when he does these monologues. They're glorious pieces of poetry. And this is one of the most gorgeous and moving ones. Let's put it in context. He liked working with Greek myth. And the myth of Tithonus is a minor myth, but a fascinating one. Tithonus was the human being who was the young, beautiful male lover of the goddess Aurora, or Dawn. You know the goddesses are always going around Earth, and she had one. And she loved Tithonus so much that she went to Zeus and said, I want you to give my lover immortality. And Zeus said to Aurora, the goddess of Dawn,